There's a very strong perception in a number of cultural communities that it's only a thing that happens to white people, you know.
No, I knew that I was different at a very early age, around 4. And people ask, well, how could you have been sexual? How would you have known at age 4? And I said, well, you may not know what sex is, but you know you're different. You have attractions toward people. And I remember in kindergarten, I liked Susie and Scott. And by the time I was in 1st grade, I definitely liked Joe.
I went to a concert with a friend, one of Pauline Ear's concerts, and she was saying all this stuff about women, and there were lesbians in the aisles, and there were, you know, just, it was a women's concert, you know, and I was looking around and trying not to look too hard, you know, it was very threatening. And of course I knew why that was threatening, is because I was having feelings about women.
I was involved with the women in high school, 11th grade, my best friend. But I kept on trying to, you know, we had a wonderful relationship, and we departed because she went on to college and whatever or not. But I went to college and went kind of closeted because I thought, well, maybe it was just a phase I went through. And
Asian faces gathered with our brothers and sisters of color, visible and proud in our home. Smooth, soft, brown skin, and mine is golden.
I left home when I was 18 and went on my own just before my 19th birthday. And I left because I had just come out and I didn't want to hurt my family, so I left and moved out on my own and didn't go back home or get in contact with my family again until my grandmother passed away. And when I went back home for the service is when I found out that I had had a gay uncle.
I grew up straight, and you know, I mean, I was surrounded by straight images, and I never knew what being gay was. I don't think I ever even knew what the word lesbian was when I was growing up. I had really good relationships with men, and but when I was 21, I started having these feelings towards women. It wasn't towards any one in particular. It was just kind of a general feeling. And it was something that really frightened me because I had never experienced it before. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anyone who was like that or who had any kinds of feelings like that. But somehow it seemed very natural for me.
She was married in an unhappy marriage, had 3 kids, and you know, was basically just very unhappy. And our getting together sort of spurred her to get a divorce and everything. And then we got married. Well, that only lasted for about a summer. Yes, a summer romance. And this is where I started realizing, I guess, that I was kidding myself about my ability to carry on a relationship with a woman. Because, well, you know, the emotional and the intellectual involvement was there, you know. I cared about her. I really did love her as a person. But I couldn't keep up the sexual part of the relationship.
Asians look at morals more based on what is proper for the family unit, the extension of the family, and will there be any shame brought upon the family unit, not from a religious perspective, but one from what is normal within the Asian family. And coming out and saying I'm gay and I'm never getting married and I'll never have children, that is not considered right. among Asians, and I think that's where the conflict comes in.
I feel like my family was my grandmother because she brought me up, and so I felt very close to her. And since I didn't really grow up with my parents, I really don't have that much of a relationship with them.
What I remember of my dad in high school very clearly was a time when we were watching the Gay Day Parade during the end of the school year, I think last Sunday in June. And the people were marching on the parade, and I remember the TV was in the living room, and he saw gay people walking down Market Street, and he was outraged.
Well, I told my sister I was gay, and she helped tell my parents that I was gay. And at first, it was difficult for them to accept that. It was very difficult for my father, but he accepted it, and I was very surprised. I thought he would have more problems, but he did accept it.
She sat down, and I sat down, and I said, "Mom, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. I've been thinking about this ever since I was in high school, and I'm a lesbian." And she sat there with her arms crossed, and she said, "I know."
When I think back, I said, God, that would be good if I can level with my family. I think I underestimate them in terms that maybe I could just come out and tell them. And they probably will not get angry or anything.
I've always had this fear of, my God, how many people are going to know? My parents are going to find out. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I live in San Francisco, too, because it's in California, but my parents are down in LA, so chances of them finding out is probably very slim. But, you know, now, though, hi, Mom, I'm a lesbian.
Life is joyful, it's time to celebrate. All of the lies that said you'd see a lonely end will never again. Raise your hand and be counted, and sing out, you are. There's a reason we're together, and we like lovers strong. Our love is what we have to carry on.
I grew up absorbing the Western culture. But I went to Hollywood films, listened to English-speaking song, and I found myself that it's appealing to me in terms of maybe because it's different and because the way it has been done, it is more professional.
I mean, I grew up hearing Japanese and smelling the foods, but I don't really know what part of that is mine. Because there are parts of how I was raised that I don't want to keep.
Part of my growing up was trying to become assimilated into American society. That was something my parents had taught me as I was growing up, that it was important for me to be able to make it in American society. Of course, when we say American society, we mean the white-dominated culture. So while I was learning some traditional things about Asian culture, they really wanted me to fit in.
Where I went to college, Mount Holyoke, was in Western Massachusetts. It's a very white school, not the most conducive place to think about my ethnic identity or my lesbian identity. I mean, I think they've made a lot of progress over the years, but when I was there, there wasn't a lot of safety for me to do that.
Fitting in the Midwest was basically not suppressing, but not not really addressing my Chinese heritage, just sort of setting it aside and just being like everybody else, which was meaning being like all the other white folks that I interacted with.
I came out in the mid-70s, and I never saw another Asian woman in a bar. I very rarely saw Asian men. So I always felt very different and very lonely. I felt like other people sought me out because I was the only Asian woman, and perhaps they saw me as being very exotic. So it was a fairly lonely experience. I thought I was the only Asian lesbian in the world.
But I experienced discrimination, not so much racial discrimination from the straight community, it was from the gay community itself, that gays experienced discrimination being gay, many times did not have an open mind compared to anyone else. And when it came to going to other gay bars, that a lot of times racial barriers were put out against Asians. And when I moved to San Francisco, I found out that there were carding policies, door policies that required 3 picture IDs from gay Asians in a particular bar.
The gay scene was real different than what it is now. Like, for example, I used to go to the Badlands or the Elephant Walk, and I stuck out like a sore thumb. I used to get all these attitudes because I was different, right? I was Asian. It's like people used to look at me with like, "What are you doing in here?" type of a look. You don't belong here. And I went in there with the attitude, well, these people are gonna get to know me and get to know me because I'm me, and accept me for that. And I started making friends, a lot of friends that way.
Fortunately for me, I met another Asian woman who turned out to be my first lover. It was a wonderful relationship. When I was in that relationship, it felt like it was the first love of my life. I feel like all the other relationships I had had with men prior to that had just not been as fulfilling at all. It was something totally new, totally different, and something that was all-encompassing.
Let's come down to it. What will excite me more than the others? The white people, in the sense that excited me more, because I probably fantasized of that when I was a kid.
I've always had an attraction not just to white men and black men, but basically to men who are different races from myself. Non-Asian men. I was very attracted to different races. But it was, I guess, difficult to be open, or I was having difficulty being open about my attraction to black men specifically.
Almost all of my relationships have been with white women in the past. And those were all loving, fulfilling relationships on the most part. And how I grew from them, each of them in some way. But the way that I needed to, well, at least the way I feel like I've needed to grow with regard to my racial background, being a woman of color, being able to talk about something and not have somebody go, well, what do you mean by that, It's really a different thing when I'm with people who have the same experiences.
It's been like probably the last couple of years that I really started connecting with people in the Asian community, in the Asian lesbian gay community.
Has that been long?
It's been wonderful. Because it's like almost like coming home again.
Being Asian, I think, offers me insight into issues that are not necessarily taken by the lesbian gay community at large. I don't know how I can elaborate on that, but I think that that comes from my own cultural upbringing or whatever, because I'm a person of color. And although I am very involved in the lesbian gay community, particularly in a political level, I think I see things that other people may not, or I see things differently.
I have gone a long way, yes. I no longer feel like I need to assimilate. You know, I am me, and you have to accept me for all of everything that makes up me. And I'm no longer willing to submerge parts of me, whether it's being gay, whether it's being a Chinese person. I'm no longer willing to submerge that. I'm no longer willing to say this, I can set this aside, this part of me aside, and ignore it for any reason. I get involved in things as a whole person.
After I came back from the trip to Thailand, I went to San Francisco State and studied dance there, and I started to have my eyes open up to see how beautiful my own culture, that I should retain it. As much as I turned my back to my Thai heritage, when I came here and I start to see that that's what I'm lacking of, and I form a Thai groups and doing a Thai dance.
I've been a published writer for some time. My book came out in 1983, and before that I was involved in working with different groups of both third world women writers and also Asian women writers.
I was involved with Gay Games 1 and 2, which I'm real proud of. And in fact, I have 2 of my medals here, both silver medals that I'm real proud of. And
you won those?
for physique bodybuilding, the bodybuilding competition.
I'm a professional artist, which takes up quite a bit of my time. I consider that the main part of my life. I also work part-time at a medical center in the city.
So I just do whatever I want to do. I get involved with something and I just do it, you know, knowing that I'm going to have a lot of support from my family, as well as my friends too. So.
My oldest sister is great. She now, since when I came out to her, I guess about a couple of years ago, she basically said, you know, I love you either way. I don't understand it, but that's okay.
I have a lover who love and care for me, and I think that the biggest support for me, because as I mentioned that I do need to have someone to be next to me, and he gave me love and care a whole lot then.
Well, I think my support comes from the community. It comes from the gay and lesbian community. And it comes from inside.
I have a gay brother who just recently came out also, who just lives 2 minutes away from me. And it's interesting watching him come out now opposed to how I came out. You know, we've talked and he tells me these things like, you know, that I was so lucky when I came out in my time because of the free, open, more sexual experiences that we were a part of before the AIDS crisis. And
Even though we're Asian Pacific, within Asia, there are different subgroups, and within the Pacific Island, there are different subgroups. So it's not a, you know, we have a lot of differences within our identity as Asian Pacific American, or whatever it might be. There's Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, Laotian, Thailand, South Indians, Sri Lankan, and all the sorts of people.
Count the number of cultures we're talking about. And you can't treat us all the same. We don't all look alike. We don't all act alike. We don't all respond to things the same way.
Asian Pacific communities are starting to see how that we are a lot more numerous than we thought we were. And we have a lot of things that we need to do, at least in my opinion. One is looking at how our invisibility as people of color has impacted us, how our self-esteem, how we see ourselves politically, how that's hurt us, and how it can't go on anymore.
Predictions are that by the end of this century, people of color are going to be a majority in this country. And yet there was a story not too long ago that over 90% of the positions of political influence in this country, talking about executive positions, legislators and stuff, over 90% are still white. Are we asking for too much to ask for more?
Asians in the last couple of years have been much more aware of their homosexuality, and I think they're coming out more and getting involved more in the community.
There are lots of our brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and mothers and fathers who are lesbian or gay.
50 years ago it was very difficult being Asian. And yes, 50 years ago it was very difficult coming out being gay. I'm not saying that my grandparents didn't suffer or had to struggle, but I feel that my struggle is no different in breaking and cutting barriers. Is that I'm young now and I can fight my battles now against the wall of discrimination or policies that the government sets up to discriminate against gays. But I say, I don't want to be 60 and to have to worry about people's prejudices and the things that they can put out there to impede my growth. I feel that I can fight my battles now, and I probably will continue with my name out there, that yes, I am gay, and I won't be ashamed of who I am or my name.
I think that the rest of the world is trying to tell us that we don't exist and we can't have what we want. It's too threatening. But I want people to keep remembering that the intelligence and the brilliance that they had when they were young people is exactly what we have to keep hanging on to today.